that. That is the way it's meant to be in this particular example. How can I make a mistake in this setup? Well, there are many ways I can make a mistake, but what I specifically with regards to the length of the lease, okay, what would be slightly naughty thing to do? It would be to lend out the platinum for longer than
3 months.
3 months. So if you lent it out for longer than 3 months, and the person who holds this platinum future wants delivery, the warehouseman will be in trouble. Big trouble. Because he'll have to negotiate with the person who wishes to have cash platinum and say, look, I made a mistake. I've lent out the platinum for 5 months, and I'm not going to get it back in time, to deliver to you. But you can have the platinum lease. That you can put that in your pocket, and you can have it at a slight discount or something like that. And if the purchaser of the futures contract agrees, problem solved. Problem solved. But last time I checked, the things that, for example, COMEX gold can be paid in, it's restricted to cash, gold obviously, and GLD, I think, as well, is stuck in there somewhere. But there's no sort of over-the-counter gold leases that are eligible for delivery at COMEX, for example. Not yet, anyway. So, is that clear? There's a way of being a legitimate warehouseman, and there's a way of being an illegitimate warehouseman. And it's all to do with the length of the leases and the maturities of your futures. Okay. Now, by the way, in this example, if this guy didn't want delivery of this 3-month contract, but decided to roll to the next contract 6 months, well in time for the 5 months to come for the plan, this irregularity will never be exposed. If there is always a bid, if there is always someone willing to roll to the next contract, okay, you could lend it out for 25 years if you wanted to. Because people are mugs and will keep on rolling this platinum future to the next month. And the warehouseman's irregular setup will never be exposed. So, another thing to take note of here is that in both cases the warehouse is empty. But in the first example, it's a legitimate reason for being empty. In the second example, it's not a legitimate reason for being empty because of the length of the lease. So is that all clear? Okay, good.
So the gold lease rates are always positive?
Yes. Don't look at the Kitco thing because they calculate it incorrectly.
I'm seeing negative gold rates, that's why I was asking.
Yeah. I'll go through that in a minute. Okay. So in this case, we have the gold interest rate, and we have the platinum lease rate. So you can talk about the platinum lease rate as well. The bid offer platinum lease rate. Now, if you're doing things in a legitimate fashion, then you're not going to disturb the natural state of the platinum lease rate spread. Okay? But if you do things in an irregular fashion, you will push the bid lease rate of platinum lower than it naturally should be. And the offer will come down as well, one would imagine. Okay? So you're disturbing the natural state of this platinum lease rate by lending out the platinum for longer than it should be as a warehouseman. Okay? Now, this depression in the bid lease rate is exposed when you pass a sort of bifurcation point in the number of people who want to take delivery of platinum. Okay? Because suddenly, and there are thresholds here, and I'm not going to go into the exact mechanics of it, but there are thresholds which, if breached, will mean that the warehouseman will have to go into the platinum leasing market and start what? If he has to get platinum to deliver against futures. What will he have to do?
He's got to buy back his leases.
Or he has to borrow platinum. Yeah. So when you start borrowing platinum, okay, the artificial depression in the platinum bid lease rate is now turned into an artificial elevation of the platinum offered lease rates. And an elevation of the platinum offered lease rate compared to gold interest rates means backwardation. Okay? And this backwardation is a manifestation of having artificially depressed platinum lease rates in the first place. It's an expression of the heightened premium that one can get for either lending platinum or selling platinum and replacing it with a discounted future. The two returns being equivalent. Okay? So that was all under a classical gold standard, and platinum was quoted in terms of gold, and obviously the natural interest rate was quoted in terms of gold as well. But that's not the case. Okay. So now we're just going to go and reflect upon statement 5. So the people went from having an implicit gold reference in the determination of interest rates to no implicit reference in the determination of interest rates. Okay? So you must remember that under a classical gold standard, there are all kinds of characters on the bid here. And there are all kinds of characters on the offer here. Anyone that wished to borrow money would be here. Anyone that wished to lend money would be here. And obviously that is a large part of the population of planet Earth. Very large part. Okay? So we all, in our turn, under the classical gold standard, influenced the rate of interest via our actions in the gold market and the bond market. And then comes 1971. And the last bastardized version, the last bastardized link to any form of gold was severed completely from the system. So, what actually happened at that point, the day that Nixon announced that the dollar was going to be irredeemable? So, well, interest rates were denominated in terms of dollars, and the dollar was, if you were the right individual, convertible into gold. So the interest rate did have some kind of gold reference in there, but the number of protagonists who were determining it were the set of protagonists who dealt in 400-ounce bars, which is much smaller than the set of protagonists who deal in, small gold coins, like that. So it's important to appreciate that point, because when Nixon severed that link, gold and the dollar no longer had any relationship. Okay? But the people's unit of account still remained the dollar, which is now irredeemable. And the gold interest rate was relegated to being called a gold lease rate, to try and paint the qualities of an ordinary commodity onto it, as if it were like nickel or platinum or copper or even platinum, whatever. But you can't do that, okay? You can't do that without expecting it to come back and hit you in the face at some point. And we'll go through exactly how you measure how hard they're being punched back in the face. So point 6, the set of individuals which influenced the gold interest rate directly went to near zero, as the vast majority of the people's unit of account remained the now irredeemable dollar. So people are still doing their things with now irredeemable dollars, and they no choice in the matter, but the gold is still there, and so is its interest rate. But it's now termed as a lease rate. Okay. So point 7, we need to explain a bit about the mechanics in point 7 to get on to how this unravels, how this unnatural state unravels. So now that you have an irredeemable currency, paper currency, all bonds are now quoted in irredeemable scrip. You can start doing things which would be very hard beforehand, namely manipulating the rate of interest. It's much easier in 1972 than it was in 1971. So the number of people that were involved directly in setting the gold rate of interest was near enough zero. Okay, but there are still people who borrowed and lent gold after that date. The people who borrowed gold tended to be the people who borrowed gold tended to be producers of gold, who would not have credit extended to them unless they actually had shorted some of their production, sold forward some of their production. And another class of borrowers of gold that remained were jewellery shop jewelers who kept an inventory of gold would rather take a gold loan than a dollar loan to buy gold, and speculators. So there weren't any hedge funds, I suppose, or many hedge funds in the 70s, but people who wanted to use gold for funding for some reason. Who were the people that now lent gold, though? Because no one in their right mind would have changed their gold for dollars in August 1971. But who lends gold? Who would lend gold in this environment? And the only people that lent gold were wealthy individuals and who had large gold holdings?
Central banks.
Central banks. Okay? So the gold interest rate went to just having, the central bank here and a few people here. Whereas the entire population of the planet was once here and once here. Right. Depressing the interest rate below marginal time preference. Is everyone familiar with the mechanism by which you drop the interest rate in open market purchases? You go out and buy bonds against the creation of demand deposits. Okay? So Bank of England wants to lower the short-term rate, goes out and buys, says it 4.5 is too high, it needs to be 4, goes out and buys bonds or bills or whatever on the open market, pushing the bond price up and the rate of interest down, and against the purchasing of those bonds, a demand deposit is created with the person of whom the bond was purchased, held at the central bank. Okay? So this completely turns our system of gold and the various frequencies of credit on its head. Completely turns it on its head. And causes problems. Okay? So, in a classical gold standard, let's say the total amount of gold in the world was 100 ounces. What would be the total number of demand deposits in the world, if that was the case? 100 ounces. No question. Okay. You can't create demand deposits under a classical gold standard. Why?
It's on demand.
Huh?
Because it's on demand.
Well, no, because you can't create gold. That's what I mean. You can't print gold. You can't print gold. But now, under the irredeemable dollar standard, you can create demand deposits. That's pretty amazing, don't you think? It's a big boom. Very, very big boom. You can create demand deposits now, whereas previously you couldn't. And a demand deposit is not gold, by the way. It's still a claim to gold. But the total value of demand deposits can't exceed the total amount of gold, by definition. So now, under the irredeemable dollar standard, this is the irredeemable dollar standard now. Through the process of bond monetization, you've actually distorted the amount of natural irredeemable demand deposits that there would be anyway. Obviously there wouldn't naturally be irredeemable currency, okay, but in as much and so far as the dollar, irredeemable dollar is natural, then the manipulation of interest rates creates an unnatural expansion to the level of demand deposits. Okay? But hey, you know, this demand deposit stuff can be used, and it can be used quite effectively. So what happens? What happens? Well, now it's 1971, 72. And we said that the price of the future is it's related to actually, sorry, this is still 19. Let's just say this is still a classical gold standard. The price of a future is linked to the gold rate of interest, ceteris paribus, minus any lease rate. So under a classical gold standard, the price of a gold future times the spot price. No. Okay. It's actually 1 plus this. The actual formula is a future. I don't want to use maths, but I'm afraid I'll have to with this thing. 1 plus gold rate minus lease. This is the only maths I'm going to use. It's just addition and subtraction. Times the spot price. But under a classical gold standard, the gold rate of interest is equal to the gold's lease rate. They're synonymous. So the price of a gold future is equal to the price, as it were, of cash gold. Now you move to the irredeemable state. So now we have a concept of gold futures. I'm not going to write this out again. It's related to paper rates minus, and they've changed it from gold interest rate now to gold lease rate. So in a similar way that I went through the example of the platinum warehouseman under the gold standard, referencing gold interest rates and platinum lease rates, under a fiat standard, we are now referencing fiat rates against gold lease rates. And I'm going to call it gold lease rate even though it is still actually a gold interest rate. Doesn't matter that they call it a lease rate, it's still an interest rate. paper rates minus gold lease rates, that's fine, you know. And you can now do in the irredeemable dollar market exactly the same kind of thing that you did in the platinum futures market under a gold standard. Okay? So you can buy cash gold and you can sell futures against it, and in the interim you can lend the gold out. You can lend the gold out. Now again, you can lend the gold for a longer period than you've got the futures contract written. But that's not the mechanism that causes the distortion of interest rates to become apparent. Okay? So remember that when you manipulate the interest rate downwards, you bring the rate of interest below marginal time preference. Below the wishes of the market participants. Another 5 minutes and then we'll have our break. So below, and you might think, well, this is fine, this will never be exposed, you know, this will never be exposed. But it will be exposed because you've created demand deposits that allow you to do arbitrage in the gold market. And the basis of that arbitrage will be just as irregular as the basis from which it was funded in the first place. Okay? Remember, you created excess demand deposits. The excess demand deposits that would not naturally be there. And that allows you to buy cash gold at that low rate and sell futures against it. But those demand deposits should never have been there in the first place. Okay? Those fraudulent demand deposits. Okay. So, on to point 8 now. Gold that would have been available for loan. Gold that would not, we're talking under an irredeemable dollar standard here. Gold that would not have been available for loan is now available for a loan. Because a carry trade has now been enacted that would not have been enacted were it not for the creation of the irregular demand deposits. So, lo and behold, my goodness, okay, the gold interest rate does come into it. You know, it does come into it because if you push the fiat rate of interest below marginal time preference, well then you push the gold interest rate, the gold lease rate, below its natural marginal time preference. But that's alright, because the only protagonists on the gold interest rate market at the moment are that shrunk subset of individuals. But will that last, do you think? Do you think the number of people willing to borrow and lend gold will stay at that very, very small subset? What if the fiat currency completely collapses? People will need to borrow gold. You can't sit there, king in your castle, with 1,000 ounces of gold and expect to survive. You'll need to lend it because there'll be people who want to borrow it, and you'll need to spend it as well. So, this distortion in the fiat rate of interest infects the gold rate of interest simultaneously. But there is a limit to which you can distort the gold rate of interest. Just like you can't create demand deposits under a classical gold standard. Okay? And the way that it manifests itself, this depression in the rate of interest below marginal time preference, is by backwardation. Willie? Sorry. Okay. I think we'll take a break there. We had to absorb a lot there. And we'll come back in 15 minutes.
Will you say something?